In this video, what we're going to do is make a crude version of a image viewer inside of WPF using Visual Basic .NET and Visual Studio 2019. If you don't have 2019, it'll still work, but the interface will look a little different. All right, well, let's get started. Right here, I have Visual Studio open. Here, I'm just going to go ahead and create a new project. And I'm going to go up here and actually just type WPF like that. And then all the WPF stuff will pop up here. And basically the one you're going to want is the WPF app here. So go ahead and click that. Next. Right now this is going to be a slideshow app. Make sure you save it to wherever you want it. And go ahead and place everything inside of the same directory. And right now I'm using 4.7.2 .NET Framework. Just going to click create. The first thing we need to do because we're going to be building an image application, is we need to get the references to the images inside of our application over here. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a folder, and I'm going to call that folder images. So let me expand this a little bit and expand this. And so on my slideshow app, I'm going to right click here and I'm going to go ahead and add a new folder right there. We call this images. Now all I need to do is just drag the images in here. So right here I have this Mars image on my desktop. I'm just going to drag that in there. Alright, so I have this image here, and I have this image here, and I have this image here. Now what I want to be able to do is drag those images inside of my images folder. So I have image A, image B, and I have Mars alien image there. Once you have your images downloaded in there, you want to actually change the settings to these images. So you're going to select the images themselves. I'm selecting all of them by holding down Shift and selecting them. Then I want to make sure that this is on resource down here in the settings, in the properties. Then I'm going to go to do not copy to copy if newer. And then I'm going to go ahead and save that. So because this is going to be an image viewer, we basically need some tools here. Over here in my toolbox, I'm going to go here to common, and I'm just going to choose an image right here. I'm going to drag that image, and I want to resize this image to the size that I want it by dragging the edges. Next, I'm going to name this image. Now I'm going to add some buttons, a left button and a right button. And I'm going to format this button before I add the other one so I can duplicate it. Now I'm going to actually see if I can get the symbols in here. So I'm going to select this and go here to the fonts. I'm going to look for Wingdings. I'm going to type WI, there it is. It's called Wingdings. I'm going to click on that, and what you'll see is that your text will turn to symbols here. And the symbol actually I want up in here is, I believe it's E. It's going to give me this little finger here pointing to the left, and then I can change the size of this to, let's say, like 48 should be good. So now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and maybe change the color of this. So I'm going to go to the brushes, and I'm going to want the foreground. Actually, no, I want the background here. I'm going to change the background. I'm going to click on that, and then I can go ahead and change this color, and then change the background to something that I like. And you can fool around with a lot of these things like the layout and the roundness of the button itself. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it as it is. When you go to appearance, you have these effects and a whole host of different things that you're able to mess around with. The thickness of the borders and all that sort of stuff. So go ahead and look around there and see what you like and what you don't like. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it. I'm going to push it over here. And I'm going to change this font in here to F. And so now I have this finger pointing to the right and finger pointing to the left. Now the next thing I want to do is name these things. So I'm going to select this one. I'll put Prev image. Image. That's better. All right, so now we have our slide window over here. We have our buttons over here. And now all we need to do is connect all these things together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this one, and it's going to create this code behind back here with the name on it. And this one right here is no good. I made a mistake and double click that one. So I'm just going to delete that. And then I'm going to double click on this one. And so that way we have our structure there. All right, so all I need to do is now test these out. Let me write console previous and console next. Actually, I want this to be a console right line. I want both of these to be console right lines here. And I'm going to run this and test it. There we go. We have next and we have prev. All right, so I'm going to close this. Now I want to go ahead and make these things increment. So I need something to increment forward and backwards in time. So what I'm going to do is create something called an index here. Index as integer, which is going to allow us to go forward and backwards in the number and the count, because when we put our images inside of a list, we're going to have to be going forward and backwards in that list. So this is why we want to go ahead and start this off in 0, because we know the lists have indexes of 0. So that's why we want to start this off at 0. And now here what we want to be able to do is whenever this is clicked here, we want this to be whatever it is will equals the index, which is currently 0, plus 1. So that means when this is clicked, it'll be the index will equal the index, which is 0, plus 1, which would then be 1. And then down here, we're going to do the same thing. Instead of plus, we're going to say minus. And now what we want to do is go ahead and print out that index. So I'm going to put the index down here, and I'm going to say convert it to a string so that way it can be printed out properly. I'm going to do the same thing over here and convert it to a string. Now what you notice what we're doing, we're taking this incrementally. We're taking this one piece at a time. What do we need? We want to make something to where the buttons can make the images go left, move left or previous and next. So that way we need a number to be able to do that before we even get to the image. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit start, and we're testing it every single point, at every point. So right now I'm at -1, it says. -2, because here this is the previous, or is this the next? Let's see. There we go. We're going backwards. We got something backwards here. So in the previous one, it's supposed to be subtract, and then the next one is supposed to be plus. And this is why it's good to test these things. I wasn't even paying attention to that. So now that I've already tested it out, now I've already fixed an error that if I would have kept on going, it would have been something I would have had to look into. So it's going to keep on going here. And now it's going backwards here. So we got that functionality there. And so now that we have that functionality there, we want to go ahead and now start storing our images. And how do we store our images? Well, we know we have the images over here. We want to now store those images into a variable. And while a variable would actually work, I'm thinking more of making this more object-oriented because maybe we want to use the images for something else later on. So perhaps we should make an object that its sole purpose is to manage our images, because maybe we'll have something else that we put into this application, maybe like some animation, or maybe some effects, or maybe even some other calculations, utilities that we might add to our application. So maybe I don't want to just put all my code here into one big code block. I'm going to want to make myself a new class that its sole purpose is to deal with the images. So here I am currently working in the main window class. And to tell you the truth, in object-oriented programming, one of the major tenets of object-oriented programming is separation of concerns. And right now I'm coding everything into one big blob of something that if it crashes, it'll be hard to figure it out as this thing begins to grow. So I need to be able to separate these things. And the best way to separate it is to make an object that its purpose is not for the window, but its purpose is to manage my images for me. In order to do that, we could make classes a couple of ways. I can go in here actually and right click here. I can go to add, and I can actually add a class here, which would give me a separate file, and I can work in that file as a separate entity, a separate object, a separate class. However, when I'm working on something, I like to see things right where it is. And even though with this Visual Studio, I could make a class and drag it to the left and to the right, and I can see all those things, sometimes it's much faster for you to just type the class directly into the same file, because in the end, it does process the same way. It's all about visualization, how readable is everything. So for right now, I'm just going to make the class in this this main window.vb, but later on I'm going to refactor and I'm going to extract it out into its own file. So in order to do that, all I need to do is type the word class, and I'm going to call this class slide images, because it's going to manage all my images. And I just hit enter, and in VB it automatically makes the end class for me. So the question is here, as an object, what is a slide image? You know, you're asking what is an object. For instance, if I were to ask you what is a car, you can say, well, it's a vehicle. Well, what I'm really asking is what makes a car? You know, a steering wheel, is it the wheels, is it all of those things? Well, it possibly could be. We're not making a car, but we are making a slide image. So we have to define what the properties of a slide image is. And the first thing is, it does need a link to these images we're going to have here. So we're going to go ahead and make a private variable called URL. And then we're going to make a list that's going to hold all our images. We're going to make that public. I'm just calling that img list. And I'm going to make it as a new list. It's going to be a list of string, because we're just going to have the reference to where the image is. And then we're going to have a procedure here, and we'll just make that public, and we'll call that add image. So whenever we want to add an image to this slide images class, we'll use this add image property or procedure, and in there it's going to take an img name, an image name, and it's going to be as a string. And now when we add that image name, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take that URL. URL will equal, because all of the image we know goes into this main folder, I'm going to type image here, because I know I'm looking for the images folder, this images folder over here. So I'm going to type images there. And then if I go deeper inside with that slash, then I can go ahead and add the next thing here, which is the name of the image itself. So I'm going to go like this, say plus the name of that image. So now I have this structure to where whenever a person uses this add image, it's going to add that name with the root name of the folder that we stored our images in, plus the name of the image itself. And it's gone, when the person adds the image in here, they have to add the extension like a JPEG or PNG or something like that. Now I'm going to add this link here to my image list. So now I just go here, image list dot add, and then I just add the URL here. All right, so now my slide images is done. Now all I need to do is go up here and create a version of that slide image and use it in my project. And the way we need to do that, we need to bring this class into this class up here, okay? So we need to create a brand new variable that represents this class, but we need to make a new version of this class. If we understand this part right here, this is a blueprint. Okay, it doesn't really exist yet. So we have to make it exist. And the way we do that is we go up here, and in VB we can do it all in one line. So we can say dim, and we can name this anything we want. And I'm just going to name this SL images, or let's say like slide images as new, and I'm going to put this as a new slide images, like that. Now, when I do this, this is the exact same as me doing this, okay? Slide images, right? So this right here is a variable, and it's null. There's nothing in it. It hasn't even been created yet. All I'm saying here is that this right here, this name right here, must be one of these. It's not that yet, but it must be one of those. For instance, when I make this integer here, I'm saying this must be an integer. I can't put strings up in there. It goes the same thing when it comes to these classes and these objects, except that when you're dealing with objects and classes and you just do it like a regular variable, while you do have a variable, you do not have a class yet until inside the program itself, you do something like this. That equals new. You use the special keyword new. Now I have myself basically a new version of this slide images here. So the problem that it has is that in Visual Basic, when I put this here, that's actually telling it, hey, you want to actually run that class. So what I would have to do in order to get rid of this error here, when you look at this error, it has variable value of type slide images cannot be converted to slide images. Okay, so basically what I need to do is remove this, and then I won't have a problem here. But as you can see here, I create this this class here, and then I instantiate that class by calling the special keyword new and then the class name. And now I have access to everything that this class has. But instead of doing this in a separate declaration, what I can do is just say as new. So just so now you know that as new does both of those things, but it does it all in one shot as opposed to doing it in two shots. And it all depends on your application. Sometimes you want to instantiate it later, but sometimes you don't need to, and you just instantiate it right away. What I want to now do is add the images to my class, except I don't want to add the images inside of the button previous or the button next or anything like that. I want to add it when the application starts. So what I have to do is open up the when this window is initialized, I want all those variables to be placed. Now, remember what I said before, that this class is called slide images, and this is a main window class. They're both classes. They both do the same things as far as base classes go. But all classes have this special new keyword. That means when the class is activated, when the class starts, that's the first thing that needs to happen. And so with the main window class, even though I don't see the new procedure in here, it is here. But we can access it ourselves by just typing sub new and just hit enter, and it'll automatically write out the rest of this part for us. So I type sub new and hit enter, and it'll write the rest of this for us. Now, this is what's now going to happen when the application immediately starts. Now, you don't want to mess around with this. I got rid of those comments there. You don't want to mess around with this. You want to start after this. And after this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, but I don't want my sub new above my declaration. It's just bad coding. So I'm going to take this sub new and I want to put it underneath my variables. I like all my procedures and stuff below the variables. All right, so now inside of this sub new, what I'm going to do is utilize this right here and add those images. So now I'm going to say slide images dot, let's see, in my slide images class, I have image list. However, what I want is to add an image. That's why I created this here. So I'm going to say dot add image. And now I can go ahead and add the name of the image. And let's see over here, I have this image over here, a.jpg. I'm going to type a in there, .jpg. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other images. So I'm going to pause this real quick and I'm going to type that out. All right, so I've now added all of these to my images. I should not get any errors. Nothing really should work yet, but I shouldn't get any errors. So I'm going to save this and I'm just going to run it. And I still get these numbers and I still get those numbers. Perfect. So now what I want to be able to do is go ahead and add the images to at least one image first to my image box right here. Now, the image box has this thing here called source. Like if I were to go into this arrow, you can see I can add a source to that right away, but I want to do it in code. So instead of adding the source here, I'm going to go and add the source when it first starts up. Now, the way we add the source is first we got to call the name image.slide, and we got to call the source property. And the source property takes a bitmap image. Now, a bitmap image is a class inside of .NET. So if it's a class, then I need a new version of that, just like I did the other classes. So I'm going to say new bitmap image. So now I have myself a new bitmap image. And now I'm going to create a new URI, because the bitmap image, if I put my mouse over it, what you'll notice is that it has two overloads. One of those overloads is that inside of here, it takes a URI. So I want to say a new URI, and that's going to be the location of the image. And so here's where it gets a little tricky. Inside of here, the location of the image is inside of the list of images that I have inside of my slide images. So remember, when I made my images here, I added the image, right? And then it added it into that image list here, this image list here. And we have that public so we can access it. So now that we know that it's inside of our slides images, inside the image list, we just need to get that image out of the image list. So our slide image reference is here, and we want to get that link from there by saying dot, not add image, but we want image list. And which one of the image lists we want, I'm going to put this in brackets, and I'm going to put the first image, which is image 0. All right, so now that we have that image, we want to go ahead and add what kind this will be inside of that URI. So we'll type URI kind, and then we're going to type relative. That's the type of the image, the kind of image. Okay, and I have one extra one of those in here. Okay, so now I have the slide images image list here with the 0 there, and I have the kind of image that will be. And so now really what we should see is when we load up our image, when we load up our application, we should load up our image as well. So I'm going to hit start. And there we have it. We have our image. Now it can't go left and right yet. We just wanted to see it load. So now our next thing is to add this to the buttons. So we know our buttons go left and right, and really I don't need this anymore, but if you still want it there, you can just go ahead and hit an apostrophe to comment that out. And I'm going to hit an apostrophe here to comment those out, just in case you want it later. But sometimes this becomes clutter, so a lot of times I just like to get rid of it. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay. So instead of 0, I want it to be index. That's going to be the previous, and I'm going to do the same thing over here to the next. So it's always, now it's going to take this index and it's going to move through the images. Now I will tell you, we're going to run into an error because we have 3 images here, and if I keep on going, it'll go negative numbers and it'll go positive numbers, but let's see that happen. I know for a fact if I were to push negative right now, I'm going to get an error. But for now, let's at least see it work before I get the error. I got an error because I went past the number of items in here. So we have to put some conditions here to prevent it from doing that. And that's pretty straightforward. Before we even anything happens in this button, we want to check to see if the index itself is, we want to see if the index is less than let's see, the slide images. Now inside of that, we want to see if it's less than the image list. We want to see if it's less than the image list dot count. And because the image list dot count is off by 0, we want to say -1. Then if this is true, then we can do all of this. Yeah, so that's good. All right, so we want to do the same thing, basically the same thing here. So I'm just putting this up here so you can see it's basically the same thing. So we want to do basically the same thing here, except this part right here is that. Okay. This right here is exactly the same. Now, the only difference between this part is that we're trying to see, because we're going previous, we want to see if index is greater than 0. If it is, go ahead and do this. If index is greater than 0, go ahead and do this. That's the only difference. So let's see if this works. Hit start. So I'm clicking and it won't go anymore because of our conditions. And I'm gonna go back. And there we have it. We have ourselves a image viewer. There's a few things I want to change though to make this a little bit cleaner. While this is completely fine, I'm gonna do a shorthand version of this. I'm gonna say -=1, which is the exact same thing as what I had before. And here I'm going to say +=1, which is the same thing I had before. It just cleans up the code just a little bit more. And it makes things work, more readable. To me, it does. If you like it the other way, it's fine. It doesn't change the speed or anything like that. It's just more readable. So now I have two classes, one that I can add on to and add new items to or new functionality to without actually even messing with the code. And then I also have my images put into a nice folder structure where I can add more images later on. Even as my application remains the same, I can actually still add more images. I can even add a JSON file that has links to the images and add it onto this later. And also we now have our buttons that we can pretty much use for anything. Because it's not specific to what's actually happening. Now let me go ahead and run this one more time just so we can see it work. And there we have it. We have our image viewer. Now you're going to want to probably clean up your interface a little bit. I only did it this way just so that way you can learn how to do it. I'm not really trying to make it pretty so much. I just wanted to show you the functionality. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, and make sure you share. I'll see you guys next time.